So, welcome to COMP6441, Cybersecurity for Dummies. Think of this as sort of a Bible for cybersecurity, the 10 Commandments of the religion of Richard Buckland. There are 5 topics which follow the modules that we covered in the course in the first half of the term. This includes thinking like an attacker, risk, trust and secrets, social engineering, insiders and confidentiality, and privacy. If you wanted the second half of the course, sorry. Anyway, let's start with the tour. To be a good cybersecurity engineer, we first have to enter the correct mindset. Remember that a good cybersecurity engineering mindset involves 1. An ability to analyze, 2. Our security eyes and vulnerability spotting, and 3. A rational, moral approach to difficult situations. We can see these reflected in the 3 topics that were covered in this chapter. The first was this idea of the attacker's mindset. The concept is based around the fact that it is much harder to protect something than it is to attack, because the attacker only needs to find one point of failure, whereas the defender needs to make sure that every point is secure as needed. As a result, if we take an attacker's mindset, we will more easily see those single points of failure. I demonstrated the effectiveness of the attacker's mindset by revisiting one of our activities, the house burglary, and conducting further analysis on it. The second topic I covered was open source intelligence. This is an interesting exploration of security eyes as we looked into the innocent things such as social media and business networking sites with the express purpose of stalking someone. Not only did it show how vulnerable we are on social media, it perfectly demonstrates how our weakest security link could be something seemingly harmless like LinkedIn references. The final topic I covered was how to be a good engineer, which is a fight on 2 fronts. The first was good faith, and the importance of morality in cybersecurity. Since cybersecurity can delve into morally dubious territory, a la open source intelligence stalking, this is a critical skill to maintain professionalism and clean criminal records. The second principle was a good gut instinct, and the importance of estimating and reasonableness tests in cybersecurity. In this chapter, I covered the reasons why we should be wary about how much we rely on computers, why we are so willing to ignore the potential risk, and what to do to lessen all of this. I started this chapter with trust, chiefly why it is so hard to trust computers. I explored the 2 generals paradox and the idea of the impossibility of communication, the key vulnerability of any network system. I also covered what happens when we do place unjustified trust on computer systems. Finally, I looked at whether trust in humans was also dangerous in security systems, a precursor to later chapters. I then looked at the principle of risk in cybersecurity. Risk is an especially dangerous phenomenon due to the fact that we never see risk itself. We see the outcomes of risks, however it is hard to justify putting money and effort into something so that it doesn't happen. Similarly, it is easy to forget that risk is a part of a symbiotic relationship, this idea of a type 1 and a type 2 interaction. When we have a risk, it can be a false positive or a false negative. The 2 are inverse, so if we try to reduce a false positive, it will lead to a higher risk of a false negative, and vice versa. I also looked at the importance of accounting for risk and its probability. Finally, I looked at secrets. It was important to first note that no secret in cybersecurity is actually a secret, since we always have to share secrets to use them. This leads nicely onto the communication conundrum and the CIAs of cybersecurity. How do we send a message to someone else and make sure that it is confidential, has integrity, and is authenticated, so that we can communicate privately on an open network? We also have a brief introduction to the history of ciphers, including Caesar ciphers. In this chapter, we delve deeper into the fallibility of humanity and how social engineering can manipulate human vulnerabilities for unwilling or willing corruption. I first explored cognitive vulnerabilities, characteristics that will cause people to have specific psychological tendencies. I also curated a list of some of the most common cognitive vulnerabilities and examples of how they apply to cybersecurity. I also covered the principles of attention and how it is similar to a flashlight in a dark room. I also drew connections between deception found in magic tricks and social engineering attacks, since both involve manipulating and curating attention away from the dirty truth. Furthermore, I began looking into the behavior of people who were socially vulnerable, often kind and trusting, or lazy or ignorant, and why it's inevitable that these traits exist. I also touched on people who are coerced into giving information or access, a topic that was explored further in the next chapter. In this chapter, I explored the intricate world of industry insiders, the motives that cause them to violate confidentiality, and what companies can do to protect themselves from it. Hint, it's not a lot. I started off with the reason why insiders are so powerful, the M&M approach to security. Essentially, it's the walled city method of security, where you have an extremely strong initial barrier of security and then nothing inside. This relies on the assumption that everyone inside is good. When they are not, they essentially have open access to all components of the system, which is really bad. I also looked at methods to improve this archaic standard, such as defense in depth and least access privilege. I next looked at what makes an insider an insider. I explored how they use trust for their gains, as well as the reasons behind their actions. Some, like whistleblowers, have moral obligations, while others have more selfish and financial reasons, or are coerced into becoming insiders. Finally, I looked at the ways to stop or fix insider leaks, which are quite limited and are mostly reactive to a leak that is already discovered. In this last chapter, I explored the complex privacy concerns that surround cybersecurity and the concern between keeping systems and the general public safe and keeping the data and surveillance of users safe. I explored some of the benefits of surveillance and mass data, including the invaluable safety benefits of systems such as CCTV in not only detecting, but tracking and targeting potentially dangerous situations. I then looked at the potential risks and vulnerabilities of having such surveillance systems, with a focus on their collection of data and metadata in centralized locations, as well as the growing value of data on the grey and black market, and the trade-off that is required between safety and privacy with surveillance. Building from the danger of data, I explored some of the potential consequences of data being leaked, with identity theft and retention. There was an analysis of the potential dangers of someone stealing your identity, which is easier than you think, and an analysis of a forward security and data. Finally, I looked at the common motives behind surveillance, and its ability to change the behavior of the participants, in both positive and negative ways. I provided an overview of the various stakeholders in the surveillance game, the government, the corporations, and the individual, and the idea of the balance of motives, where each stakeholder pushes their agenda to create an uneasy balance of surveillance. I decided to include some of the engineering lessons and activities of COMP6441 into little extension chapters throughout the book. The point of these was to offer a more intricate understanding of both cybersecurity techniques and some examples of cybersecurity systems that supported the main content. Some areas that I covered included how cybersecurity engineers quantified the strength of encryption systems and computer power through bits of work, the various methods for ensuring confidentiality and integrity through ciphers and keys, as well as drawbacks to those methods, and a write-up on the benefits, uses, and logic behind hashing and hashes.